Hi, I am Dr. Sonu Thomas. Welcome to this lecture on data acquisition and signal processing for aerospace and mechanical engineers. This is lecture 1, data acquisition systems. So, usually in a DAC, you have many different steps. First step would be to measure a physical system. A physical system could be anything. It could be a pressure, it could be temperature, it could be acceleration, etc. To measure this physical system, you need a sensor. Okay, and sometimes you need special signal conditioning to remove noise from the sensor, sometimes to amplify the sensor signal. Then you need to convert these signals into a digital signal for it to be stored in a PC. We will look at each of these in detail in the coming slides. So, what is a signal? Okay, so a simplest form of signal can be thought of as a simple sine wave. Okay, and this sine wave could represent pressure, temperature, etc. And the amplitude of this sine wave can be defined as distance from the peak to the mean, and the time period of this wave can be defined as time between these two peaks. Once you know that, you can get the frequency of the signal by taking the inverse of the time period. In frequency domain, the same signal can be represented as a single peak with that particular frequency and that amplitude. It's good to remember that. So, what is a sensor? A sensor is basically, it detects a physical impetus and then it can convert that physical impetus into some form of electrical output which can be further measured. Okay, so an actuator does the opposite. It will convert a electrical input into some kind of a mechanical output. So you can think of your mic that we use as a sensor and your speaker as an actuator. Now, how to choose a sensor? So there are things which you should be very careful when you're choosing a sensor. First thing is the sensitivity and the dynamic range. Okay, so the sensitivity is given by the ratio of your change in voltage to your change in physical system. So here in this case, if you take delta P to be the change in pressure, so delta V by delta P will give you the sensitivity. So, and across some pressure, you will see a straight line. Okay, so beyond that pressures, you will see some deviation from the straight line. So that distance is defined as the dynamic range. If you go for a higher sensitive sensor, what will happen is you will have a smaller dynamic range. The next thing about a sensor that you should be aware of is the frequency response. So what happens is, for a given input, you are going to get an output for different frequencies. Okay, so what would happen is, for a range of frequency, you are going to get a flat response. Okay, beyond some value, you will get a different response. It's good to use your sensor only in this flat response region. Okay, so avoid using these sensors where your response is going to be very high. This particular curve is typically for a piezoelectric sensor where you have very high frequency uh, frequency which corresponds to its resonance frequency. Okay, so next would be signal conditioning. So as mentioned earlier, sometimes the sensor can give you a noisy signal. You might want to remove the noise. Okay, sometimes the sensor can give you a very low amplitude signal. You want to increase the amplitude, and then vice versa also may be true. Sometimes you have a very high amplitude, you want to bring down the amplitude. Sometimes you might have a case where signal conditioning can even convert the analog signals into a digital one. Okay, on the left bottom you can see a PCB model signal conditioner. This kind of signal conditioners are used in ICP sensors. Okay, this is a 8 channel signal conditioner where you have 8 input channels, and it will, so you can use 8 sensors at any given time. On the bottom right, you see a signal conditioner by Keisler. In this particular signal conditioner, you have an added advantage of using some kind of low pass filter or even a band filter. Now let's look at analog to digital conversion. In this case, a 2-bit 2-bit DAC is going to give you 4 levels of quantization. So if red represents your analog signal, blue represents your different quantization levels, okay, or it represents your digitized signal. So in case of a 3-bit resolution DAC, you are going to get a better representation of your original signal. Okay, so can you guess what this table represents in terms of bit resolution? You can take a moment to guess. Here you can see 16 levels of quantization. So this will represent a 4-bit DAC. Similarly, you can have 256 level for 8 bits, 1024 levels for 10 bits, and over 65,000 levels for 16-bit DAC. So this brings us to what's known as least significant bit or quantization. So how it is defined is, it is the ratio between the voltage range and the bit resolution. So for example, if we have a voltage range from 0 to 10 volt, or it could be -5 to +5, for a 3-bit device, your least significant bit is going to be around 1.25 voltage. Okay, whereas in case of a 16-bit device, your least significant bit is going to be approximately 152 microvolts. So here you can see I have both the signals are digital, okay, but just by using a higher resolution DAC, you can represent your signal more continuously as compared to a lower bit resolution signal. So next we would see is how to sample your data. Okay, uh, here one way of sampling your data is known as multiplex sampling. In this, what we have is, for two different probes, if you are using two different sensors, okay, you are going to use a multiplexer to sample the data, okay, and both the probes are going to have a common sample and hold module. In this case, what happens is, first probe 1 is sampled, then that data is held, then while the second probe is sampled, the data is transferred to be converted into a digital one. Okay, so you can see here there is a delay between sampling across probe 1 and probe 2. So for example, if you have 1000 samples per second as your maximum sampling, what would happen is, if you have n number of channels, that sampling maximum sampling will come down. So if there are n number of channels, your maximum sampling will be 1000 by n. Now, to avoid the limitations caused by multiplex sampling, we can use a simultaneous sampling method. In this method, unlike the previous method, you have a sample and hold device which is dedicated for each probe. Okay, so in this case, both the probes can be sampled at the same time and the data can be held at the same time, and which is further sent to your digital conversion. Okay, and these two probes are actually synchronized using a timer. Okay, so in this case, if you have 1000 samples per second, it also represents 1000 samples per channel. So here you are going to have 1000 samples per second per channel at your disposal. So let's look graphically how this works. Okay, so in case of a multiplex sampling, consider events four events which are happening at the same time, and you are going to use four different probes to measure that event. Okay, so in this case, what would happen is, if you use a multiplex system, you're going to sample, first sample is going to for probe 1, second sample will go to probe 2, third sample will go to probe 3, and so on. Okay, so you can see this. So only the fifth sample will come back to probe 1. Okay, so this actually gives you a small phase delay. Okay, so the phase delay is not equal to 0. Sometimes this might be crucial in your measurements. You want to avoid phase delay, you want exact simultaneous measurement. What you can do is go for the simultaneous sampling. In this case, each probe first sample is taken at the same instant, and so on. So here you have 1, 2, 3, 4 samples. Each sample for each probe is taken at the same time instant. So here you don't have a phase shift. It's almost zero. So now let's look at quantization error and gain. We already looked at what is quantization. Let's look at what is the error. Now here you consider a 2-bit DAC with plus or minus 5 volt range. So by definition, your least significant bit is going to be 10 divided by 2 raised to 2, which is 2.5 volt. Okay, so here if I want to measure that voltage value which is represented by this red line, okay, unfortunately that red line doesn't fall into one of these 4 different levels. Here what will happen is it's either going to take this value or this value. Okay, but since this is closer to this value, it will take this as the value. This is what we call as quantization error. Okay, so you can define your maximum quantization error to be half the value of your least significant bit. Okay, gain is defined as the ratio of your output signal to the input signal. Gain actually helps in reducing these quantization errors. Okay, we'll look at it in detail in the next slide. I'm taking a 4-bit DAC with 10 volt range. Okay, so here 4-bit DAC is going to give me 16 levels of quantization. Okay, so I have this 16 different lines here. Okay, so consider a signal with a small amplitude. Okay, in this case you can see only 4 lines are used to define this signal. So when this signal is quantized or discretized or digitized, what is going to happen is you're only going to get 4 different levels for this signal. Okay, now what I do is I amplify this signal, okay, to some new value. In this case what happens is now all 16 levels are being used to define this signal. Okay, so now when this new amplified signal is quantized, okay, or digitized, what would happen is this will have 16 different levels of information. So if you compare across these two signals, this has only 4 levels of information, whereas this has 16 levels of information. Okay, so now you can see that when you store an amplified signal and still you divide by the gain, you will still get 16 levels, whereas without using gain you only got 4 levels. Okay, so this helps in representing your signal in a more better way. So now let's look at different voltage source types. Okay, so there are two different voltage source types. One would be floating signal source and another is ground signal source. In floating signal source, your signal is actually isolated from the system ground. Okay, so this represents the system ground. The measurement is actually isolated from the system ground. Okay, in ground signal source, it is referenced with respect to your system ground. Okay, so examples for a floating signal would be thermocouples, okay, signal conditioning with isolated outputs, and battery powered devices. In case of a ground signal source, uh, mostly these instruments, you'll get this kind of signals where you don't have a isolated input. you can have different types of grounds defined. Okay, so the earth ground would be where your system is actually system reference is connected to your earth ground. Chassis ground would be defined as your system or your instrument is actually connected to your chassis, which could be further connected to your earth's ground. Okay, and sometimes your printed circuit board or your electronics within itself can have a common reference, which is referred to as a signal ground. So we have looked at different types of signals. Now there are different types of measurement modes. In this, first mode would be a differential mode, which is the most commonly used modes in data acquisition. Okay, in this what we have is we have a positive and negative terminals dedicated for each channel. Okay, so this MUX represents multiplexer. So in this case, channel 0 is acquiring data. Okay, and other channels are not connected. So here the voltage difference or the voltage between channel 0 positive and channel 0 negative is what is actually measured, and that measurement is reference to the system ground. Okay, next method of measurement would be ground referenced single ended or reference and single ended mode. In this case, you only have one common system ground. Okay, here we are not going to have a dedicated negative terminal for each channel. You are going to have one common reference. The advantage of this would be you can have almost twice as many channels, measurement channels available as compared to a differential mode. Okay, another method of measurement would be a non-reference signal single-ended method. Okay, in this case you don't have a reference to your system, rather you have a reference which is inbuilt in your DAC. Okay, so in this case this is acts more like a floating signal which I referred earlier. Okay, so this is isolated from your system ground. So now you may want to know when to use which mode. Okay, differential mode is widely used because it has many advantages. One is it has best signal to noise ratio because it rejects ground loop errors. Okay, and also it rejects EMI. Okay, so in single ended mode, only advantage you have is you get twice as many channels to measure. Okay, you should use this only when you have higher signal to noise ratio. So limit use of single ended in these conditions. So you should have high input signal source. Okay, second would be your cables are not too long and your cables are properly shielded and all share a common reference signal at the source. Here, if even one of these criteria is not fulfilled, it's better to go with differential mode of measurement. So in many DACs, you would have an option to choose between a DC or AC coupling. Let's consider this signal which has an offset, DC offset and of 10 volt. Okay, and it has some fluctuation. Now if I use a DC coupling, I am not only going to measure the DC offset, I will also measure the fluctuations. Okay, in case if I use AC coupling, I am only going to get the fluctuation part of the signal. AC coupling will remove your DC offset. So you need to be careful which coupling you are using while you are measuring your signal. Most oscilloscopes and DACs will have these options available. Now let's talk about overloads. So sometimes your signal, you have a signal which you want to measure, which goes from +1 to -1. Okay, what happens is your DAC is only designed for -5, -0.5 to +0.5. range. In this case, what will happen is you will have a clip signal. Okay, so DAC cannot handle a signal which was more than plus or minus zero point 0.5 volt. So this would be called as a DAC overload. Next would be a sensor overload. Your DAC can handle voltages from minus 1 to 1, but unfortunately your sensor might have that limitation. And in that case, still you will get a clip signal, but this time it is due to the overload because of the sensor. The third type of overload would be out of band overload or frequency overload. Okay, so DAC can have a limitation of maximum frequency which it can measure based on the timer, inbuilt timer. Okay, so any frequency beyond the maximum frequency you are not going to measure it correctly. So good to be aware of these different overloads in your DAC. So let's look at some DAC hardware. Okay, here you can have different types of DAC systems. These are commonly used DAC systems in many labs. Okay, so here you have a simple DAC chassis, and these modules, these ADC modules can be connected to this chassis. Okay, and this can be connected to your PC. Next, other second option would be, instead of having only chassis, you can have an entire PC built into a chassis. Okay, here all you need is a monitor which can be connected to this DAC, and you can start using this as your dedicated standalone data acquisition system. Okay, here instead of using these modules, it will use a PXI card, PXI ADC cards. Okay, another type would be where you have a terminal block and a PCI card. Terminal block is where you are connecting your sensor signals. Okay, and this card is where your digitization happens. So this card is mostly inserted into your PCI slots in your PC. Till now, we looked at only how to actually capture the change in voltage correctly. Okay, but we never care about this voltage fluctuation. To capture this voltage fluctuation correctly, Nyquist Shannon came up with this sampling theorem. In this theorem, what they suggest is your sampling frequency should be at least twice the highest frequency content in the signal. Mathematically, your sampling frequency should be greater or equal to twice your system frequency. You can also define Nyquist frequency like this. So Nyquist frequency would be defined as your sampling frequency by 2. So now let's look at this more graphically. Okay, so consider a 1 hertz analog signal, sine wave signal. Okay, here every second I have one full cycle. Okay, you can see every second I have one full cycle. Now let's sample this at 2 hertz. That means every cycle I'm going to have 2 points. Okay, so here you can see you are able to capture the fluctuation by sampling it at 2 hertz. Okay, now let's sample this at a higher value. So let's sample it at 3 hertz. This means you are going to have 3 samples per cycle. Okay, so you can see that you are getting a better capturing of the same fluctuation, but in both cases you are able to capture the fluctuation. So as per the Nyquist, frequency above 2, equal to 2 or above 2 will capture the fluctuations correctly. Now consider 2 hertz sampling once again. In the previously we saw this, for 2 samples per cycle you are able to capture the fluctuations. However, if you had sampled, your first sample was at 0, what will happen is you are going to get a 0 value for every sample. Okay, this is what happens when your sampling frequency is exactly twice the signal frequency. So it's always recommended that your sampling frequency should be more than twice your signal frequency. Now let's look at what happens if I have a lower sampling. So in this case, I'm going to sample at 1.5 hertz, which means I'm going to get only 3 points for 2 cycles. Okay, so 1.5 into 2 would be 3 points per 2 cycles. Okay, so you can see here we are going to get a totally different signal than the original. Okay, so what we are getting is you are getting a wrong output. This happens because we are having a lower sampling than as prescribed by Nyquist theorem. This is what is called as aliasing. Okay, so you have a original signal, and because of undersampling you ended up getting a signal which is totally a wrong signal. Okay, so to avoid aliasing, make sure your sampling is always greater than your system frequency. Okay, now let's look at aliasing example. So here I have a sampling frequency of 100 hertz. Okay, so by definition my Nyquist frequency is going to be 50 hertz. So any frequency beyond 50 hertz will have aliasing effect. Okay, so these are my original frequencies: f1 25 hertz, f2 70 hertz, f3 160 hertz, f4 50 hertz. Okay, now for 25 hertz, as per the Nyquist criteria, I am going to capture it correctly because it is less than my Nyquist frequency. So any frequency lesser than 50 hertz will be captured correctly. Okay, now if I want to capture 70 hertz, my sampling is not good enough. You know that for 70 hertz signal I should have twice the sampling. I should have sampling more than 140 hertz, which is not the case. So I am going to get a alias signal here. So this alias signal will look something like this. Okay, so instead of getting 70 hertz I ended up getting 30 hertz signal. Okay, now let's look at what would happen for 160 hertz. In 160 hertz we will get something like 40 hertz. Okay, so these 40 hertz and 30 hertz are aliased signals of 160 and 70 hertz respectively. Okay, so can you guess what would be the alias signal for 510 hertz? Take a moment and guess it. You can pause the video here. So 510 hertz, it would be 10 hertz. Okay, now you might think how I got these numbers. One simple way of getting these numbers would be, once you know your sampling frequency, multiply that sampling frequency by an integer and take the difference from these numbers. Okay, so if I multiply 100 into 5, I'm going to get 500. If I take difference from 500 hertz with this value, I'm going to get 10 hertz. Okay, so once you fix your Nyquist frequency, any frequency beyond Nyquist will show up as an alias frequency in your measurement. So aliasing real life. Let's look at this video. Here you're seeing a helicopter, okay, rising up in the sky, and the blades are almost stationary. Okay, this looks impossible, but actually what is happening is, here the camera used to capture this video has the frames rate or the frames per second very close to the actual rotation of the blades. Okay, now let's look at another example. Here here you would have seen this a lot in real life. Even though the car is moving forward, you can see the rim moving backwards. Okay, ring moving in the opposite direction of the movement of the car. Okay, this again is because of aliasing, and this is called as a wagon wheel effect. Now let's look at this backward rotation of wheel in more detail. Let's take a a fan, a ceiling fan for an example. Okay, a ceiling fan with three blades, and the fan is moving at 1 hertz, so 1 revolution per second. If I'm sampling at a lesser value, what would happen is the fan will not come back to its original position. Okay, so it will be lagging by some amount. The next frame will be lagging further, so you will have an effect of the fan moving backwards. Okay, so if I had the fan speed and the sampling equal, what would happen is I'm going to get the same frozen image every time. This blade will come back to its original position every second. Okay, another thing you should know is there are the number of blades are 3 in this case. So even if my sampling is going to be one third of 1 hertz, I am still going to get same image. Okay, so it's always a good practice whenever we are dealing with a rotary object with some symmetry to mark one of the blades with a marker so that you can track that blade properly. You would have also seen this kind of images. Here the distortion is caused due to something called as a rolling shutter effect. Okay, so this is different than the wagon wheel effect which we discussed in this lecture. Now how to avoid aliasing. Okay, so we know that any frequency below Nyquist can be captured correctly. Any frequency above Nyquist will show up as a alias frequency in the measurement. So we can use an analog filter. So all this problem arises because of our sampling. So before we sample, why not use a filter? So any frequency beyond Nyquist, we can actually avoid getting into the measurement system. Okay, so an ideal filter will cut off all frequencies beyond Nyquist. Okay, but a practical filter will have a small transition. Okay, so here we can use this method to avoid frequencies beyond Nyquist frequency getting into our measurement. Okay, so let's take an example where here we have a sampling frequency of 250 kilohertz. Okay, and the amplitude is 2 voltage, and the cutoff frequency used in our analog filter is 5000 hertz. Okay, so an ideal filter would have allowed all frequencies from 0 to 5000 to go through, and any frequency beyond 5000 would have completely got attenuated. Okay, so but a practical filter will have this kind of behavior. So even before 5000 hertz, it will start killing the amplitude. Okay, so you should be aware of this small transition when you are doing analog filtering. There are different analog filters available. Okay, so depending upon your application, you can use different filters. Now, till now we only looked at frequency capturing. So as per the Nyquist sampling theorem, we had to do was sample at least twice or more than twice your signal frequency. I have 1 hertz signal. Okay, so every 1 second I am getting one full cycle. Okay, now I will let's sample at 3 times the system frequency. So I'm going to get 3 points in each cycle: 1 2 3, 1 2 3, and so on. So here we are seeing that there's some amplitude which we are not capturing. Okay, so better would be, why not go for higher sampling? So when I go for 5 times of system frequency, I get more points on each cycle: 1 2 3 4 5. Each cycle I'm going to get 5 points. Okay, so we are seeing that by increasing the sampling we are going closer to the actual signal. So if I take 9 times the system frequency, I'm going to get a better representation of the original signal. So as a thumb rule, I would always go for 20 times the system frequency or 20 samples per cycle. If you have higher capability, go for higher value. So till now we looked at temporal aspect of Nyquist theorem. Okay, so in time, how many samples are needed to capture the frequency or the fluctuation correctly? Here, most of the sensors will have a physical size. Okay, so most of, if for example, if you are going to measure pressure, the sensor is going to average the pressure across that phase and give one value. Okay, so if you have a signal which is moving in space and has a wavelength equal to or smaller than that size of the sensor, it is not going to show you that pressure variation. is is going to average and give you some value. In this case, it's going to give a zero average. Okay, it could be any mean value or zero, so it's not going to give you that pressure fluctuation. So typically you need at least two samples in a given wavelength. So your wavelength should be at least twice the size of your sensor. Okay, this is not a big issue when you have your signal, okay, moving in the direction of the sensor. Okay, sensor phase. So here you won't have that issue. But in case where your sense signal is moving parallel to the face of the sensor, you will run into this issue. Okay, so just be careful about these things when you are doing measurements. Some practical suggestions I want to uh, talk about is, whenever you do measurements, always use shielded cables. Okay, so the cables which are going to carry your signals, make sure they are shielded. This will protect your signals from EMIs or ground loop errors. Okay, also you cannot have the BNC end which is not shielded. So your cables might still protect you from EMI, but if your connectors are not shielded, there you can have some EMIs. Okay, so there make sure even your connectors are having shielding. Okay, so basically buy a connector which has a metal casing. And other thing aspect you should be careful would be, if you are using, as we mentioned earlier, if you are using ground source signal, okay, ground source signal, good to have a common ground. Okay, this is not a big issue if you are using a floating source signal. Okay, you can go back and look at the difference between floating source and ground source. So make sure if you are having a ground source signal, you have a common ground. Okay, other thing is, you would have seen these small beads in some of your cables or some of your DAC wiring. These are basically Farad beads which actually avoid spikes getting into your measurement. So spikes are nothing but high frequency components. So high frequency components can be avoided using these Farad beads. So till now we only looked at one dimensional data, okay, data varying in time. Now if we are going to capture image which is a two dimensional data, is good to know the bit resolution of your camera. So if we are going to use a camera with 1 bit resolution, you are only going to get two values, black and white. Okay, so as you use a higher bit resolution camera, you can have different levels of your grayscale. Okay, so for 12-bit you will have more than 4000 levels of grayscale values. Okay, if you are using a color camera, in that case you are going to get, for 8-bit you are going to get almost 256 values for red, 256 values for green, 256 values for blue. So the combination you can have almost 16.7 million combinations possible. For 10-bit this becomes more than a billion colors possible. Okay, so just keep in mind whenever you're acquiring image data, that based on small change of variations you are going to capture or you want to capture, you use your bit resolution accordingly. So what is the takeaway from this lecture? Till now we looked at different aspects of data acquisition, okay, the advantages, the limitations of each component by itself. Now let's take a actual example. So here I have a sensor, PCB sensor, microphone. This microphone is usually used to capture sound or measure sound. Okay. Here I have a signal conditioner, PCB model. Okay, signal conditioner, and I have a analog to digital converter, National Instruments module. Okay. This sensor is designed to measure a pressure up to the range of 165 dB. Okay, this 165 dB is based on the reference value of 20 micropascals. Okay, the sensor has a sensitivity of 2 millivolt per pascal. Okay, for a variation of plus or minus 2 dB, this sensor can be used from 5 Hz to 80,000 Hz. If you want a smaller variation, this sensor can be used from 7 to 12,500 Hz. Okay, this signal conditioner actually can measure anything between 0 Hz to 100 kilohertz, and it can give a gain, incremental gain from 0.1 to 200 times of your input signal. This particular ADC module has a range, measurement range of plus or minus 10 volt. It has a bit resolution of 16. It has a maximum sampling of 500 kilosamples per second per channel. Okay. So based on this 5000, we can immediately calculate the Nyquist frequency. So any frequency beyond 250 kilohertz cannot be measured using this ADC module. Okay. Now let's look at the signal conditioner. It clearly states that any frequency beyond 100 hertz it cannot measure. Okay. And here sensor has a wide frequency range. In this case, the takeaway would be if you only want to capture the frequency, you can capture up to 100 kilohertz. Okay. Mind you, this is limited by your signal conditioner, not by your ADC module, because ADC module can clearly go up to 250 kilohertz. Okay. Now, if you want to capture the frequency and amplitude, as discussed earlier, it's good to have as many points in a given cycle. So if I take 10 samples per cycle, I can measure up to 50 kilohertz. If I go for 20 samples per cycle, I can measure amplitude. I can measure signals of the order of 25 kilohertz. Of course, this signal is going to be a better representation of the original signal because of more samples per cycle. Now, if I replace the previous sensor by a piezoelectric sensor, in this sensor you are going to get a range of dynamic range of 100 psi. Okay, sensitivity is given by 50 millivolt per psi. Okay, and the resonant frequency, which is typically very high value of the order of 250 kilohertz. Okay, so most frequencies below this can be captured using a piezoelectric sensor. Okay, the rest remains the same. I'm using the same signal conditioner, I'm using the same ADC module. So if you want to capture frequency and amplitude for 10 samples per cycle, again you can only get 50 kilohertz signal, and for 20 samples per cycle you can get a signal of 25 kilohertz. So let's summarize the talk. So as per Nyquist criteria, your sampling frequency should be more than twice your system frequency. Okay, to avoid aliasing, use a low pass filter. Okay, then if you keep changing the sampling rate, you are going to get a lower, if you lower the sampling rate, you are going to get a lower Nyquist frequency. Okay, which reduces the maximum measurable frequency. And for measurement modes, mostly use differential mode if available. Okay, avoid using single ended mode. Okay, for a signal source, always go for a floating source rather than a grounded source. Always use shielded cables and connectors to avoid EMIs. Okay, this brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you for your attention and stay tuned for more lectures in this series.